You're listening to Work It Lady, where the goal is for all ladies to be the best versions of ourselves. And if we happen to be moms, be the best moms ever and maintain our sanity while we do it. Okay, guys. So today we are going to have definitely an episode for all women. We're going to touch on something kind of serious today. We all, at some point or another, may have been in a situation with a job where maybe there's unsafe working conditions, maybe there's something going on at that job in that company that's an issue. And of course, the natural course of action is to bring that to the attention of your manager, bring that to the attention of HR. And, what's supposed to happen is a nice, gradual process of resolving whatever issue is present. But unfortunately, a lot of the times that does not happen. And what can happen is you are either pushed away or you are somehow silenced for trying to basically do the right thing in the workplace. So today I have a very special guest. Her name is Stephanie Van de Motter. Hi, Stephanie. How are you?
Hi there. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing great today. Thank you for asking. I'm so glad you're going to sit down with us today because, we're going to talk because you are the owner of the Silence No More Foundation. And what Stephanie did, guys, was she was the first person to have won a whistleblower retaliation lawsuit and harassment lawsuit against the Irvine Company, one of the most powerful real estate companies in America. So I'm really interested to know about this topic, and I'm sure the listeners are too. So first, though, could you tell me a little bit more about your role in the company at that time when you were there, and what were the events that led up to the lawsuit?
Absolutely. So first, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on your show today. I truly appreciate you inviting me to be here, and I've listened to some of your podcasts, and I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk to you and to some of your listeners today. Uh,
Aw.
my purpose is to be of service and to share my experience to your listeners, and to hopefully, if there's any women who have gone through what I've gone through, I know that for me that it was a very lonely experience, and I felt very
Mhm.
alone when I was going through it. And so now that I'm on the other side of it, it's really important to me to be able to uh, share share what happened to me, and to share my experience, strength, hope with other people, to so they can get through it. And so back to your question. So your question was my role. So I worked as a property manager at a building called 1221 Ocean Avenue in Santa Monica, California. And
Mhm.
I this was I worked there from the age of 33 until I was 49. So for
Mhm.
women, those are, my experience, and with all of my girlfriends, those are our prime working years.
Yes.
I really dedicated 16 years, which is a huge chunk of time, the majority of my professional career, to this company. And the building was it was a high rise. It was a celebrity high rise with
Mhm.
uh, every celebrity you could ever imagine that lived there. And I lived on site. So I was the manager. I lived on site. I lived in this beautiful apartment that overlooked the ocean. And
Mhm.
I was surrounded by the most interesting people that you could ever imagine every day. And I mean, the truth is that it was my dream job.
Wow.
It's still hard for me because I mean, I loved it.
Oh, yeah.
And I plan to work there. Honestly, I plan to work there, forever. I mean, I wanted to work there for my entire life. And um, so I had a job that I really loved. I think it's also important just to point out that uh, I was probably the least likely person to, if you would have asked me 7 years ago, I would have told you that I was the least likely person to become a whistleblower.
Mhm.
It's a career that I loved. I felt like I worked in a male dominated industry where I thrived. I loved what I did. I was recognized for what I did. I loved my employer. They loved me. And, it was a great experience. And it was a I felt so lucky and so fortunate to have that. And it's kind of setting the stage because it's also important, you know, leading up to the events, because I really always felt like if I, prior to this chain of events, I always felt that if I had a problem, I thought I actually could go to my company. I thought I could go to HR. I felt that I could go to my previous supervisors, even with HR. Prior to this like incident that happened, I felt safe, and I felt like I could safely come forward to my company if I thought that there was something that was going on. Never in a million years did I ever imagine that it would be a different experience. And so then the next part of your question, which is what happened was that around 2013, the end of 2013, the experts at our company became aware that we had a water intrusion. It's a high rise. So we realized that there was a water intrusion and mold issue.
Oh no.
It started appearing in some of the apartments, and as they started to go out and investigate some of these other units, they realized that it was actually a systemic problem that was going on throughout the property. And so when I lived on site too, by the way, and I was also impacted by this. I actually was really sick for a really long time. I didn't understand why I was so sick all the time. I later learned out it was because of the mold. So as I realized that this was happening, the first thing that happened was that when we became aware of the issue, I was told not to share this information with anybody. I
Shame.
was instructed to keep it a secret, not talk about, not to use the word mold, not to tell people that there was mold in the units. We actually, there were inspections that were done in a series of units. And out of those units, there was actually mold found in occupied units that residents lived in. And we were informed not to tell anybody that there was mold in these apartments. I mean, it was really, and again, because I lived on the property, I lived there for 16 years. These residents were my neighbors, they were my friends. I knew them, I cared about them. I knew their children, their families, I knew everybody. And so it was, I mean, it was as if, for anyone that's ever gone through a relationship where they've been cheated on, and all of a sudden they think that they're married to this person, and all of a sudden they find out that they're married to a totally different person.
Sure.
It was like the same thing with my employer. I had one experience where all of a sudden in one day everything turned upside down, and my experience completely changed, where all of the rules of engagement in terms of the company that I worked for, how we operated, and how I thought we were supposed to act, which was ethically, tell the truth, all of those things. It all went upside down, and everything was different. And it was, I still, to this day, I know it happened to me. I'm sitting here and I'm talking to you about it, but even as I tell you the story today, I mean, it's still hard to accept that, to find out that when that in this case where we had a very serious problem that actually risked the health and the safety of
Yes.
the residents, the employees, and the general public in the building, that the company actually was making a decision to put the profits ahead of the safety of the residents. It was a horrible situation for me to be put in. And it was not only devastating to me personally, it was devastating to me professionally. And to this day, I remain, you know, very traumatized and sad by it.
So first, I want to thank you for beautifully setting the stage as to the backstory and what was going on in your life at that time, and sharing how much of a beautiful experience you initially had with this company in terms of your job, how much you loved your job, and how much of a deception it was, because you worked all those years with no issues, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere you see how they're mishandling this major issue. And to me, I have to say big kudos and props to you, because some people would have just said, hey, you know what, I'm getting a paycheck, they told me not to say anything, I don't care. And it's nice to run across people who are still morally connected, who are still interested in the well-being of others, and who are willing to do the right thing no matter what the cost. Because like I said, you could have very easily just said, I love my job, I love my life. I mean, I know the building that you're talking about, just from that area. I've never been to that particular building. I'm not sure, what the deal is with it now, but it's a nice area, and that had to be so cool for you, working there all those years, with the very cool neighbors and everything. And I'm sorry that happened to you, because that's not easy. It really isn't. So now we kind of got to the point of where everything went wrong, with the mold. And guys, the mold, that's a big, people think, oh, mold, like whatever. No, that causes respiratory issues and like chronic breathing issues. And that's a big deal. Like that stuff has to be done. Anyway, now let's get into how exactly they tried to silence you. So once you get to the point of, hey, this is an issue, you bring it to, who it needs to be brought to, what happened then?
Well, so what happened is that, backing up to what you also just said, I want to say that when you're talking about, some people look one way or look the other way, and becoming a whistleblower it's really a process and not an event. I don't think that I would tell everybody that I talk to, I'm sure you're sitting across looking at me thinking, I could never do what she did. There's no way I would ever have the courage. People say these things to me all the time. But what happens is that I think that until someone is actually put into a situation where the circumstances are something that they just never imagined they would be put into, and particularly when you're talking about people's, health and safety being put at risk, it actually becomes almost it's like a choiceless choice. It's the only way that I can explain it. I didn't feel like I could make any other decision, on top of the fact that the reason why I kept talking about it was that I was actually trying to save my job. I wasn't trying to lose my job. I was trying to save my job. I was trying to keep the building safe. I was trying to keep the residents safe. And mold, as you talked about, is a really serious issue. But on top of that, what happened, because it's a high rise, is that in a high rise building, when a high rise building goes under any kind of construction, it's a totally different ball game, and it can be very dangerous. So if you take a look, for example, at this fire that just took place in New York, right? Bronx. And so there was two doors that they found that were propped open, and that allowed the smoke to go through. So at this building, what happened was that as part of this mold remediation when they started to do the mold remediation, they were removing exhaust shaft walls, apartment walls, and hallway walls that were all fire rated walls, specifically designed so in the event that there's ever a fire that would take place in the building, that people could safely exit the building, or they could actually safely stay in the building depending on the floor that they were in. And because they actually removed these walls and left them totally missing for months, it was so dangerous. I mean, it was really dangerous. And, I was a property manager, my responsibility was really, renting the apartments, keeping all these people happy. But then also, I was responsible for the day-to-day interactions between the construction team and the residents. And so, I started becoming concerned because they hadn't pulled permits, and I knew there was something wrong. And the more I started to, like, I'm not a construction person. I'm the building manager. And so the more I started to read and learn about these things, and, the internet, I would go online, I'd look at the online, I'd look at building codes,
Sure.
and I would read these things, and I would see that, and then I would read about high rises, and I would realize how dangerous it was, what was going
Mhm.
on. And so the next part of what your question is, so what happened was that I had raised concerns internally to very high level key executives at the company for
Mhm.
almost about a year about what was going on at the building, at
Sure.
which every step of the way I was dismissed. And, it's interesting because I think that with men and women, and I think that all of these claims, men, women, no matter what the gender, no matter what the circumstances are, they're all really important. But I will say that for me as a woman, I felt that I was treated differently because I was a woman. So,
Sure.
like, for example, when I raised the issue of permits or raised the issue of, the building code in the beginning, I mean, like literally, I was dismissed. And it was like, you don't, almost like told that you know, you don't let the men handle this. This is not, you don't
Right.
under, this is not serious. I was told that it was a judgment call. As I continued to raise more concerns, then I was told that it was the Irvine company, they made a decision to do the work without pulling permits, and it was up to them to make a decision about how to handle the consequences if they got caught. So as time went on, as I became more concerned, I finally had a point where I decided that I needed to reach out to Donald Bren. So Donald Bren is the chairman of the Irvine Company. So the
Mhm.
Irvine Company is one of the largest real estate development companies in the United States. Donald Bren is the wealthiest real estate owner in the whole country.
Mhm.
He's worth 16.2, at least $16.2 billion. So they're, the company, and you're talking back to like HR policies. So most big companies today have these, they should have policies through their human resources department that dictate what does an employee do. So if you see something, you're supposed to say something, and how can you
Mhm.
safely bring this to the attention of the right people at the company. So what I did was that I followed those policies. At the same time, though, because it was the flagship property, it was, the number one property owned by the Irvine Company. These apartments run up to like $40,000 a month. I mean, they were really
Mhm.
expensive, very high profile. And I just couldn't imagine that Donald Bren possibly had any idea that this was going on at his property. And so I reached out to him thinking, I mean, honestly, I truly believed when I reached out to him, I thought that I thought he was going to reach back out to me personally
Mhm.
and thank me for bringing it to his attention and having the courage to tell him that one of his properties that he owned had
Mhm.
these dangerous conditions. These dangerous conditions were there. And I expected that he would hold all these other people accountable, and
Mhm.
that I would keep my job, and that we would fix the issue, and it would go back to the company as I understood it
Right.
before, right?
Mhm.
But what happened was the opposite. I sent this letter, a former letter, of which he did not reach out to me. I was contacted by the general counsel of the company. And again, they told me that they thought that it was a judgment call.
Wow.
There were a series of other things that went on. And then a few weeks later, I had reported in this report that I made to Donald Brunn. I called out 4 specific apartments with violations. And so a few weeks later, there was a Santa Monica city inspector that came to inspect these units. And at that inspection, the representatives that came from the corporate office of the Irvine Company, they were standing there. They opened up these walls. The inspector said, "It looks like there's been recent construction here." And were these walls removed? Was there a mold? And this person said to this inspector, a government official, "I don't know anything about any construction.
Oh
And I
my.
don't know anything about any mold." And keep in mind at this point, at that point, we'd gone in, I think there's 120 units, 60 units in that building had been impacted by this work.
Wow.
And he literally lied at the direction of the corporate office to this person. And so then after that, when I found out about that, and there was a former a gentleman who used to be the former building safety official for the city of Santa Monica. He was at the inspection, and he came to me and said, if I was still the building official for the city of Santa Monica, he was not anymore, but he said, if I was, I would ride tag this building today. And he said, it's not dangerous. And so with that, what happened was that I literally was left with two options. One was I either have to step forward, like as a former whistleblower to the city of Santa Monica, because
oh my gosh.
Irvine Company didn't do it. They had the opportunity to like tell on themselves that day and they didn't do it. So it was either I had to step forward and report this, or, you know, keep my mouth shut. And I mean, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do it. I couldn't risk. And at that, I will say though, at that stage when I did that, you know, I knew that I actually then, I should say, then I believed when I came forward, I thought that I was informed and told and read that there's all these laws that are in place that protect employees who come forward to tell these kinds of things. And so I thought that I would be protected. So I didn't think I would be retaliated against. I didn't think I was going to lose my job. I thought that what would happen is that the Irvine Company would be held accountable, that they would have to, you know, fix these things and get it right. But I actually thought that I would still be able to, I didn't think anything was going to change. But what happened was within days after that, I was demoted. My responsibilities were taken away. They started to retaliate against me. You know, like literally I had a new supervisor who, it was really egregious what they did to me. And they just did everything that they could to remove me in any way possible so that I would no longer have access to what they were doing, because they still weren't actually changing their behavior yet.
Right.
And it was, you know, my story, I guess, is one of those and it's one of the reasons why I've actually why I founded the Silence No More Foundation, is because to me, there's two things. So one, there's a law and there's legislation that we can put into place. But then the second thing that happens is the question is whether or not those laws are actually enforced. So what I saw around the same time was that the Me Too movement happened. So when the Me Too movement happened, sexual harassment, when the Me Too movement happened, was absolutely positively illegal. You couldn't sexually harass people in the workplace. But then what happened was that the Me Too movement came forward and it got a lot of attention. And that actually, the next thing that happened is that new legislation was passed with that, where it became, at least in the state of California, it became illegal for companies to require employees with anything related to like sexual assault, sexual harassment, anything to do with sex. They could no longer require an employee to sign a non-disclosure agreement about that information. And I think most importantly is that women feel now that they can come forward and that someone's actually going to listen to them, right? Like employers follow the laws now. So then you've got me. So I wasn't sexually harassed, but I'm a whistleblower. I was harassed at the workplace for what I did. And I too, whereas these protections that should have been in place for me, they actually have not been enforced. And so there's new legislation that's happened in California now, where it's called the Silence No More Act, which is part of my Silence No More Foundation.
Right.
And the Silence No More Act is basically, the easiest way for me to explain it is that it's like the Me Too movement on steroids. So whereas the Me Too movement, the only thing it applied to before was sexual harassment or any kind of like sexual assault, now what happens is that this applies to any type of retaliation, discrimination, or harassment in the workplace, where any of those types of things that if an employee is a victim of any of these types of unlawful acts in the workplace, employers can no longer use any type of like a non-disclosure agreement to hide that behavior. They
Mm.
can't keep that behavior a secret anymore. They can't use that as collateral in order to get an employee to settle a case. And because what's happened in the past is that, so, employees, they are victims of these types of acts.
Hmm.
Then the employer says, well, great. So what they've been doing is that they've been purchasing, employers have for years have been purchasing the right to buy the silence of their employees so that they can continue to allow the perpetrators and the wrongdoers in these workplaces to keep doing that same behavior.
Yeah.
And so, like, I am sure that the Irvine company very shortly will come out in the public, because I'm starting to talk about this, and they're going to say, oh no, this is an isolated case. Stephanie, this was an
Right.
isolated case. But the truth is that the Irvine company has a long history of non-disclosure agreements with residents,
Mm.
like mold, with employees. They use non-disclosure agreements all the time. They won't be able to anymore, but they have in the past. So they've been able to keep a secret and hide this type of behavior. And I just, I happen to be, they weren't able to, the laws have changed. And at the same time, for me, I have always felt that because of what happened at the building,
Hmm.
I felt, and because the Irvine company owns 65,000 apartments,
Yeah.
I have always felt that I have a duty to
Yes.
retain my right to be able to talk about this, because I feel like people really need to know what happened at this property. Because if it was happening at that building, at the flagship, star-studded, most expensive building that the Irvine company owns,
Mhm.
what's happening elsewhere? I am committed to making the same thing happen again, so that it's this, these same protections that are now in place from the Silence No More Act, which I have to say that, so her name is Efima Azoma, who
Okay.
interest was whistleblower. She was responsible for getting this legislation passed. I admire her so much. She's just such an incredible woman for what she's done. And, so she was responsible for getting this legislation passed, which just took place. And so the law went into effect on January 1st. And so I
Huh.
feel like my duty now, so she did the legislation, my duty now is to get the word out.
Right.
You know,
Right.
word out, because I think that, so like with your audience today, I think it's important. One thing I think that happens is that most employees don't know what their rights are.
Right.
They just don't.
They
And
don't. It's
especially
hard,
they don't know what their new rights are. And there's new laws that are out here.
especially
But
when people like you get into and help us in that way by not being afraid to come forward. And there's so many injustices that happen in the workplace to women. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. I could go on for days about the number of injustices that I myself have experienced. And you almost get to a point where I'm sure, like you were probably scratching your head, like, is this actually happening? Like, this is so wrong and so blatantly wrong. Like, why is this okay? Why is this trying to be swept under the rug? This why,
it's interesting, because when you're talking about injustices, so in terms of like demographics, so in terms of like non-disclosure agreements and forced arbitration, statistically, women are more impacted by these types of things than men are. And then
Mhm.
African Americans actually are one of the highest groups of people that are under non-disclosure agreements that that they have not been able to, that they've been victims of injustice in the workplace. Income wise, like the typical like employees, it's not employees that, make a ton of money that usually are impacted by this. It's people
Mhm.
that, it's, are working class. It's,
Mhm.
California, there's 40 million people that live in this state. And so when you think about how many people live in the state and how many people are impacted by these kinds of things, I mean, the numbers are really, they're astronomical. All of those things, when you put that all together, I mean, it tells a really important story. It tells a really
Does.
important stories in terms of like accountability and change. Like, listen, there's there's I came forward, so I am a whistleblower in a high-rise building, and I lost everything. to try to prevent people from losing their lives. But most people aren't going to do that. So in 1 year, we've had a building that collapsed in
Mm-hmm.
Miami. We have all these people that were killed in the fire and another high-rise fire. And so the something this tells you that, I mean, like, so I am sure that there are other employees out there today, right now, that
Mm-hmm.
are working in, property management and high rises, whether they're apartments, whatever. They know that these things are, they know that there are these, conditions, and they're terrified to come forward because they're afraid they're probably going to lose everything, and they probably will.
Right. And I think that is what it's so hard because it's like, okay, we need more people to be willing to just do the right thing. Because I feel like in your situation and with anyone who's been in anything similar, if HR or the supervisor or whomever, even if 2 or 3 people had been willing to do the right thing, I feel like sometimes it could have changed the trajectory of the situation a little bit. But the when everyone else is saying, "Oh no, I'm just going to turn my eye," and you only have one person willing to do the right thing, that's really hard.
I actually want to really facilitate change. So I want to facilitate change for employees, but I also believe in prevention. So prevention, I've worked in property management my entire career. It's like what I know.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked with real estate developers, and I understand the ins and outs of I've worked with major employers. So, I think that, to me, one way is that I want to help employees, but the other thing is that I know that there are employers that are out there that they have great ethics, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
hear kinds of stories, but they don't really know what they need to do in order to make their employees feel safe, so they actually will want to come forward. And so that's another thing that's really important to me going forward, is to be able to work with employers, any employer that wants to work with employers to help them understand what went wrong. And so one of the first things that went wrong is that you can't have your internal ethics complaint department being an internal function,
Right. Right.
right? Like that's never going to work.
It's
So,
always in the best interest of the company.
right. And then when these kinds of things happen, it's the employees. So like I remember when I was a little girl and I was like in, I think, the 5th grade, and I was a crossing guard, and
Mm-hmm.
I had the crossing guard, and I got on the bus one day, and this little girl was lost, and I took her off the bus, and I took her home, and I helped her to find her mom, and I went back to school, and they
Oh,
had this announcement, and I was rewarded for doing the right thing.
yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't given money. I was just recognized, for doing
Mm-hmm.
that. And the truth is that that was what I wanted. I mean, as you saw in the beginning, I loved my job. I loved my
Right.
career. I wish I was still working there. Like, I didn't want to lose my job.
Mm-hmm.
I loved my career. And I think that, that when conscientious employees want to tell their employer that there's something wrong, we need to have it set up in such a way so that employees can do that and keep their jobs, and not only keep their jobs, but that employers should then say, look at what this person did. Thank you
Right.
so much for coming. That was what I wanted. It's like I was accused of everything under the sun. And what I wanted was, I wanted to keep my job. I wanted people to be safe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be acting out of integrity. I wanted to make the company that I worked for proud of me.
Right.
That was what I wanted. And I didn't get that, but I believe that other people can have that.
So tell me a little bit more about, let's say the listeners who are listening today and they hear, about your Silence No More Foundation. How can they join? What can they expect? What's happening at this new venture for you?
So first of all, I'll just say that I just started this foundation on January 1st. So I'm, forming a board. I have a lot of things that are going on. I mean, I
Mhm.
think there's a couple of things. One, I would say that right now, one of the most important things that I'm trying to do right now is that, if there are other people that are out there that have stories that they can tell, and
Mhm.
they can legally tell their story. I want to be really clear, because what I'm not trying to do is put somebody in jeopardy. There are I think of so there are advocates that are out there right now that are women who are highly educated. They have like all these degrees.
Mm-hmm.
They're on television. They're well known. They're famous. I am not that person. I was a property manager who was lucky to have my job. I don't have all these degrees. I don't have, a whole list of things to read off. I'm like, I'm like one of the 40 million Californians that
Mm-hmm.
is that is forgotten and unrepresented. And so like those stories, I think that some of these like bigger stories are really important, but I'm also interested in the stories of people that we all relate to. And
Absolutely.
those stories, because that's where, I had a team of 40 people that reported to me when I worked at 1221 Ocean Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And, these were positions where people, they were hourly workers, they were valets and housekeepers and, the front desk staff and maintenance team. And so these were people that weren't, like highly paid people. These were
Mm-hmm.
people that, they were working and, and trying to, because I know that this happens all the time. So one, if anybody has stories that they want to share, that's great. I would love to hear about that too. If they want to talk about it on social media and if they can do it safely, I can't say that enough. I don't want
Right.
anyone to do anything where they would like jeopardize, and or if someone's in active litigation,
Mm-hmm.
I won my case, but prior to me winning my case, I don't think that I would be doing. I can tell you for a matter of fact, I wouldn't be doing this. So if someone's
Okay.
like in active litigation, I would actually recommend against it to, or talk to your lawyer. Be really careful about what you do. Make sure that you're protecting yourself. But I think that, or if there's someone that's out there in your audience right now that they really understand my story and they need someone to talk to,
Mm-hmm.
silencenomore.org. And my email is stephanie@silencenomore.org. Please, they can reach out to me.
Wow.
One of the worst parts for me was that I literally did not know anyone when I went through this who had gone through this experience.
Mm.
And it was, that was one of the worst parts. I just didn't, when you can talk to another person who's gone through the same thing that you've gone through, it's a total game changer. And especially when you can talk to somebody who's gone through something ahead of you,
Mm.
right? That's
Right.
even different. And in my case, I went through it and I won my case.
Wow.
I'm here. I'm here in any way that I can to help.
Wow. Thank you so much for making yourself available in that way. And, I think that we just need more conversations like this to get
Yes.
people talking about it and feeling more comfortable with doing the right thing. Just when these situations arise, just handle it properly. To me, it takes much more energy and much more headspace and anger and just coming from a bad place to do the wrong thing. A lot of the times, if they had it just in your situation in the beginning, heard you out, taking care of the issue, like everyone would be happy now. Like you'd be at your beautiful job, like they wouldn't have to have gone to court, like it. So just being more aware, being more aware of how we treat people. You mentioned that beautiful illustration of you being the patrol on the bus. That was just you doing the right thing, just doing the right thing. And hopefully we can all get back, more into that. But certainly, foundations like yours are definitely going to be key and instrumental to doing that. So, beautiful, beautiful. And guys, I will definitely put all of Stephanie's information in the description of this episode on podcast as well as on YouTube. So you'll just be able to click and get to where you need to be. So I want to thank you so much, Stephanie, for being here today and sharing your incredible story. I mean, like I mentioned, everyone can relate to this. Many women, especially, have been through maybe not on as large of scale, but, we've all experienced some sort of, workplace issue like this, with HR and with bringing things to the attention of those powers at be and getting shut down and getting swept under the rug and getting silenced. And it just can't keep happening. So I want to thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story as well as how to get in contact with you. And ladies, I hope that you will. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
Yes, thank
Thank you
you
for having
so
me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, I really enjoyed our conversation. I've learned a lot and thank you. I really, really appreciate it. All right, ladies. Well, I want to thank you so much for listening to Work It Lady. Have a great day and we'll see you in the next episode.